Florida State Seminoles win a big recruiting battle, knocking off the Miami Hurricanes for a top wide receiver recruit.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Florida State has added Jasen Lopez to the class of 2026. Wide receiver, 5'10", about 175 pounds. This is the kind of player that you love to win the recruiting battle for, not just because he's good, but it was going to be Florida State or Miami. Obviously, that is an arch rival. Obviously, that is a hated rival. And to beat them for a player from Chaminade-Madonna, a program that is about as good as any in the United States of America, adds a little extra to it. And it's a position of need. Florida State needed wide receivers in the class of 2026. So we're going to talk about Jasen Lopez overall. We're going to talk about his impact, the total number of receivers that Florida State has, and a lot of speed, and what's next with not only the wide receiver room, but the Florida State recruiting class in general. This is something that I wasn't planning, that I saw that he committed. So I've kind of put this podcast together as I had other podcasts going on that I was a guest on, doing little notes and stuff as I was getting ready. But let's start off with Lopez, the player himself. I've seen him multiple times. This is a kid that catches the football extremely well. It's second nature to him to be a wide receiver, just really gifted with his hand-eye coordination. It's sometimes taken for granted. When you watch football, you just assume the wide receiver is going to catch it naturally. It's going to be easy and all that. Even the National Football League guys, sadly, don't always catch the football out in front of them when they can. There are a few chances where it's going to be on top of you as you turn around, whatever. Okay. But Lopez is a kid that catches the football away from his body, tucks it away, and it's very fluid. It's very nonchalant almost because it's just natural to him. Doesn't even seem like he's putting any effort into it. It's just boom, boom, automatic. High, low, down, away, doesn't really matter. Very natural hands for Jasen Lopez. He's a slot receiver that could play outside as well because of his footwork. But I still think, even though his footwork is tremendous, his hand-eye coordination, to me, is Lopez's number one attribute. Debatable. You could say his footwork's better. That would be fine. But hand-eye coordination, to me, is the most important thing for any receiver. You've got to make clutch catches, especially under duress, meaning somebody's barreling down on you or somebody has done a good job of covering you, and they're going to try to play through your hands or get a pick. Lopez wins a lot of those battles and does it even though he's not a big, big guy. Recruiting-wise, he had a ton of offers, South Florida player, but he's the one interesting player that I thought Florida State was going to recruit hard, and they did, but they really didn't have much of a shot at. I just thought everything I was told was Miami, Miami, Miami. Now, caveat to this recruitment, and as I go into it a little further, Miami recently flipped Georgia commitment, Vance Spafford. He's a slot receiver that I know well, ran 4.35 last year at Under Armour Future 50. He could smoke it. He's from the greater Los Angeles area, Mission Viejo. He flipped to Miami. Now, some might say Miami wouldn't take Lopez. I'd be shocked if that's the case. But Spafford does essentially play the same spot. And I'm not buying that Miami would have taken Lopez. To be honest, if they wouldn't have taken his commitment, that would have been pretty bad on their part because you just can't find guys like this every day, especially at Chaminade down the road from your program. You need to take him. And regardless, Florida State's getting a very good football player that now is going to catch passes against Miami. So it's intriguing. So what does Florida State have overall at the wide receiver position for this class? Well, let me give you this right now. Very athletic, beyond what you would even normally think at the wide receiver spot. I got 5 guys here, and I know a little bit about each of them. Devin Carter, the wide receiver that recently flipped from Auburn to Florida State. Burner, kid that needs to add some weight, but he can play outside or in the slot. Not going to run with him very often. No matter who you are, he can really go. He can stretch the field as a flanker or as a slot. He is the guy that is no fun, especially after he has the ball in his hand. So Devin Carter out of Douglas County High School, just west of Atlanta. That young man is Dexter Carter's son. So a legacy recruit on top of everything else. That's wide receiver number 1 on this list. Brandon Bennett, American Heritage, similar to Lopez, a South Florida kid. American Heritage is just on the edge of Fort Lauderdale. Another fast player, sub 10,500 meters as a sophomore in high school. I mean, he can flat out go. Probably better suited for slot, I would think, because he's not the biggest guy in the world, 5'11-ish, give or take. But maybe he plays outside. I don't know. But the home run speed is there once again. Elite speed. Third, Ephraim White. Kid's a little taller, but he's still very thin. He's like 6'2", 160 pounds. Very, very much a jitterbug, a guy that's not fun to play around with in space again. If he gets the football in his hands and he can size you up, the first guy is going to have a very difficult time getting Ephraim White to the ground. He could play DB as well if you wanted him to, but with the way he runs, with the way he attacks the football, Ephraim White, I think this is a guy that Florida State's probably going to leave at receiver. Let the chips fall where they may. Number 4, Jasen Lopez, we just talked about. Consummate slot receiver out of Chaminade-Madonna. He's the guy that is the most annoying player in the world on 3rd and 6. As good a route runner as there is probably in the United States, regardless, you're talking about outside receiver, boundary, slot, whatever. Lopez carves people up in one-on-ones. I've seen him for multiple years at the Under Armour camp just be dominant. Doesn't care who's in front of him. He has a plan, and he executes it. Then he just goes back and does it again. Play to play, super consistent, twitchy, and very, very much a professional in terms of how he attacks route running and how he looks at the game of football. Lopez is really good. And then finally, Darion Williams out of Plant High School in Tampa, Florida. This is a kid that's just super athletic again. Similar size to like Devin and some of the other guys we're talking about on this list. Not the biggest dude, but really, really athletic. Could be a player they use at flanker or at slot. When we come back, I want to talk about what's next at wide receiver, because Florida State went from a program that obviously needed receivers in the class of 26 to a program that hasn't busted at the seams. Are they going to take anybody else? What about the size and some of this other stuff that you can look at from a different perspective? That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. Ever wish managing your money felt a little bit easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. With that in mind, there are a lot of different ways that we can all spend money, probably worse than we should, whether it's eating out, going out with friends and having a few drinks and having a good time or whatever. This is a way that you can see where you're spending your money and probably spending it unwisely, and do it in one place to save for convenience as well with Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Make sure that you're always ready for some breaking news like today, too, because I didn't know that Jasen Lopez was going to pop for Florida State, and anything can happen right in the middle of recruiting season. So congrats to the Noles coaching staff, everybody in the back office and the recruiting department, and on down the line for getting Lopez. Now for a few questions about the overall class for the Noles, where they stand at the wide receiver position, what we should expect next, all that wrapped into one right here on Locked On Seminoles. First off, size. They don't have a boundary receiver in this class, that 6'3", 200-pound guy. It is by a bazillion miles the most difficult player to find because it's just based on God-given measurables. Height, you cannot teach. They do not have that guy yet. So to answer two questions all at once, yes, I think they'll take another receiver, but it has to be a boundary. That's my opinion. Flanker and slot, like they're loaded for bear. Now, one or two of these guys could play DB or running back, possibly, whatever. But right now, I mean, Florida State needs numbers at receiver anyway. I think they're happy to have this. And if they could, they will add, yes, a sixth wide receiver. I'm not saying I know who it's going to be. It's been a wild recruiting month. I'm having a hard time keeping up with everybody, Florida State in particular, because there are so many good players committing to the Noles. But there's got to be one guy at some point. Either you flip from somewhere else, or maybe one of the other guys are going after. I don't think there's a obvious answer who it will be, because based on what's going on, like Keon Chapman, I don't think Florida State's going to get him. I think he's going to go to Carolina. He could be that guy, but he's from Jackson, Alabama. I think they're going to miss. And off the top of my head, I don't know of another guy, a bigger-bodied receiver that fits the profile that Florida State's leading for. But again, this is off the top of my head because this happened so fast. I just tried to get to the podcast as quickly as I could, but they need a boundary. So yes, another receiver, but B, it's got to be a bigger guy. There's no reason to take a wide receiver that fits the same profile as Darion Williams, Jasen Lopez, etc. It's got to be a different body type. Now let's talk about the offense a little bit. When I was growing up, Florida State had a plethora of these kinds of receivers. They recruited them consistently and annoyed you to death with short passes, an occasional dig route, and then the receiver becomes a running back in space. Florida State was famous for it. They were probably the best program in the country at doing it for the better part of 2 decades. Short pass, receiver makes DB miss, receiver off to the races. That's it. Like, they were just super annoying with that. With this group, we could be seeing a Bobby Bowden-style offense. I could see Florida State really spreading teams out and just trying to get the football out in space. Hitch, in route, pigtail, basic slant. They're not going to overcomplicate it with this kind of group because they're so fast. Not going to be a whole lot of teams running cover one against Florida State. By the way, I hope that happens. It'll be fireworks because this is a really twitchy group. Cover one, you better bring some NFL talent because there's too much speed. Even some of the guys that aren't quote-unquote ready technically to take on the FBS level, Florida State or otherwise, if they get next to you, they're going to outrun you. So cover one, you're not going to see a ton of against Florida State, which should help the run game because teams aren't going to put that extra guy in the box and just lock up. Good luck. But at the same time, Florida State does need to get that boundary receiver too to complete the package. Florida State's had some better big body guys over the years too, but if they can combine that with this group of track kids, it's going to be a lot of fireworks. So the offense, you got your quarterback in Jaden O'Neal recently, flipped in from Oklahoma. Now you're in a scenario, you got your receivers pretty much locked down. Running back, we don't know how that's going to go. Jay Lamar, for the record, committed to Georgia. No surprise there. Florida State really wanted him, but so did the rest of the free world. Clemson, Florida, and a ton of other programs were after it too. So Florida State's not going to get him. Offensive line, they miss out on Aaron Thomas. That's unfortunate. That's arguably the most important guy on the board. He committed to Ohio State, but they're still on some other top linemen, and they've got a couple of good ones committed already. Ionata in particular at tackle. I'm really curious to see him develop because I think he's a little bit underrated. And then finally, just kind of looking at the group overall, are they going to get a tight end, a big-time tight end? I don't know, but they're battling, and it should help this year. If they don't get one this summer, Landon Thomas should be having a pretty good season this fall. And I think they'll get one this summer, but if not, they're going to be able to show, hey, you can be this guy. You can be next in line after Landon. So we'll see. But I haven't talked a ton about tight end because it's usually not the hardest position to recruit. But right now they don't have that guy that's like a dominant player on the board committed. Curious to see if they can get that done here in the next couple of weeks. Most of the kids will commit between now and the end of not this weekend, but the one following. In the recruiting season will kind of taper off. And then we go into that little lull before fall camp starts right around August 1st. So going to be several more, in my opinion, decisions involving Florida State in the next 10 days. They're going to win some. They're going to lose some. Just know that recruiting is a marathon, not a sprint. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Be back tomorrow after I get done with Future 50. It'll be a later podcast, most likely. I might do something small in the morning, depending on what happens tonight. But Future 50, a ton of interviews. We get all these kids, 50 kids come in. Media gets to interview them at IMG Academy. I'm going to be there. And then we're also going to have an event in the evening. Depending on how the interviews go, I might be a short podcast in the afternoon. I don't know. But in the evening, I'll get to see some skills competition stuff. We'll go from there. And there's going to be a podcast of some kind for Locked On Seminoles tomorrow. Just don't know exactly when because it depends on the news. But thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen. We'll see you again soon.